You might have asked yourself before if she ever feels bad for what she did, if she ever stays up at night thinking about the pain she caused. It's easy to believe she doesn't. She looks fine. She moves on fast. Maybe she even acts like nothing happened. Or worse, like you were the one to blame. But deep down, something very different is happening. This video isn't made to make you pity her or excuse her behavior. It's here to help you see clearly what goes on inside a narcissistic woman after she's hurt someone. Not because she suddenly changed, but because the act of hurting you forces her to face the parts of herself she's been running from her whole life. What looks like indifference is actually shame. What sounds like confidence often hides fear. What seems like peace is just avoidance. If you've ever felt invisible, used, or blamed after giving everything to someone who seemed incapable of love, this message is for you. Because once you understand what truly happens inside her mind after she hurts you, you'll stop blaming yourself for her emptiness and start focusing on your own healing, where your real power begins. When a woman hurts someone on purpose, a narcissistic woman often presents a polished surface, charm, confidence, and an ability to make others feel important. That surface is not a measure of inner strength. It is a carefully built image, a mask crafted to avoid a different, intolerable inner feeling, deep inadequacy. When that mask breaks, even for a moment, shame rushes in. The shame is not the light embarrassment anyone feels from a small mistake. It is a heavy, deep feeling that whispers a persistent lie. Not good enough. This shame is the engine behind the behavior that hurts others. For the narcissistic woman, admitting fault threatens the entire structure she depends on. Acknowledging wrongdoing would force recognition of the very flaws she has spent energy erasing on the outside. So instead of owning the pain caused, projection or denial becomes the reflex. The person who was hurt is labeled as sensitive, dramatic, or unreasonable. This is defense, not truth. The underlying emotional truth that a fracture happened inside her remains unspoken. What she feels right after hurting you, right after the harm is done, a cutting comment, a betrayal, a manipulation, there is often a split second where something registers. It does not always rise to full conscious thought, but it hits the nervous system. A flash of discomfort, a flicker of shame, a brief internal recognition that something precious was broken. That sensation is intolerable. The response is rapid and purposeful. Erase the feeling, dismiss the victim, restore the image. Repression becomes habitual. Instead of reflection and repair, there is a pivot to anger, blame, or cold indifference. This is not necessarily a calculated cruelty every time. It is an automatic survival mechanism. The person who hurt you pushes the feeling back down because it threatens their identity. For people around them, that repression looks like callousness. Inside, it feels like panic and a race to restore balance. The hidden stress that follows. Shame that is pushed into the dark does not disappear. It leaks into everyday life as chronic unrest, insomnia, a grinding dissatisfaction, or a compulsive need for attention. The silence that follows harm is not necessarily peace for the narcissistic woman. It can be an empty room that amplifies the inner voice she has worked to drown out for years. This internal turbulence shows up in behaviors that are familiar, constant social activity to avoid being alone, an addiction to conflict because it distracts from the hollow center, and a frantic search for new sources of validation. Watching that restlessness can be revealing. It signals a person trying to outrun a truth that grew louder the moment someone who truly saw them was lost. When she starts to feel jealous of you. After the dust settles, a corrosive kind of envy often takes root. It is not the simple jealousy of material things. It is a deeper resentment toward the authentic qualities someone else embodies. Emotional depth, integrity, resilience. When a woman with narcissistic tendencies hurts someone who genuinely cared for her, she destroys the very source of reflective validation she used to prop up her false self. The person who was hurt may recover, grow, and even thrive. That recovery can be unbearable to watch. Envy here is a mirror. It shows the gap between appearance and reality. The person who was hurt becomes proof that authentic connection was possible and that the narcissistic woman could not achieve it. That truth wounds. Instead of accepting it, the typical reaction is to devalue or erase the person who exposed the gap. That reaction often looks like belittling the survivor's recovery, rewriting events to cast the survivor as unstable, or attempting to minimize the survivor's accomplishments. These behaviors are attempts to reclaim control over the narrative, a way to deny the humiliation of being left behind by someone who moved on. When regret is not real. Regret can appear, but it rarely looks like remorse rooted in self-awareness. When regret exists for a narcissistic woman, it is often strategic and self-centered. The feeling arises when the realization hits. Something valuable has been lost and cannot be used anymore. This is not a turning point toward growth. Instead, it is a recognition of lost utility. Someone who once supplied validation is gone. This kind of regret fuels attempts to return rather than transform. Reaching back out, testing boundaries, offering shallow apologies. These actions are often attempts to hoover someone back into supplying emotional fuel. They aren't sincere attempts to rebuild a relationship or make amends for the person hurt. Understanding this is crucial. The return is about restoring the image and stabilizing identity, not repairing the harm. When she changes the story to protect herself. When confronted with the reality of what went wrong, the reflexive step is to rewrite it. A common tactic is projection, assigning the discomfort and accusation to the person who spoke up. Statements that frame the survivor as anxious or dramatic are not reflections on the survivor's reality. They are shields meant to divert attention and preserve the image. This narrative control can be subtle or overt. It can be a consistent pattern where memory itself is altered to fit a preferred story. Over time, that pattern can erode a survivor's sense of truth if left unchallenged. That is why establishing clear boundaries and retaining one's personal record of events is essential. The truth of experience matters. It is not negotiable. Why losing you still hurts her. It is important to recognize the paradox. The narcissistic woman may seem indifferent, but the loss of someone who truly saw her is deeply destabilizing. That person functioned as a mirror that reflected an image, however partial, of coherence. When that mirror breaks, the identity that depended on it feels fractured. This destabilization is not healthy introspection. It is psychological vertigo, a helplessness born from having no internal scaffolding. The person who hurt you might lash out or retreat. Both are attempts to stop the vertigo. The difference for the survivor is that the narcissistic woman's pain does not become a reason for responsibility. It becomes another fuel source for further denial. 8. Why she keeps doing the same thing to others. One of the most painful realities is how often cycles repeat. If someone refuses to sit with shame, learn, and accept responsibility, the same behaviors will be replayed with new people. The damage is not limited to a single relationship. Instead, it becomes a pattern. Seek, use, discard, then seek again. For anyone who has been through this, it clarifies why healing and boundaries are vital. Re-engaging with someone who has hurt you before is not a test of forgiveness. It is often an invitation to be replayed. The power that belongs to the survivor is the power to choose a different path. The right mix of compassion and distance. Understanding these dynamics creates space for two important responses that are not contradictory: compassion and protection. Compassion recognizes that a person who harms often carries deep wounds, that recognition does not excuse the harm. Boundaries protect your emotional integrity. Compassion for the narcissistic woman is not a call to repair her. It is an acknowledgement that her actions come from pain. The functional response for those harmed is to protect their well-being, set limits, maintain distance when necessary, and refuse to be drawn back into cycles. Healing requires steadfast boundaries more than explanations. What you can do to protect yourself. Actions count. The path forward after being hurt involves simple, practical steps that preserve dignity. Name the behavior clearly in your mind and refuse to be gaslit into doubt. Create physical and emotional distance when safety or sanity requires it. Seek support from people who validate the truth of the experience. Rebuild identity around values and actions, not around another person's reflection. Practice consistent boundaries that are easy to maintain and explain. These steps help reclaim what was taken, a sense of stable self that is not dependent on someone else's approval. Healing is your quiet victory. The greatest response to the turmoil left by a narcissistic woman's actions is steady growth. Healing is not loud revenge. It is the accumulation of small acts, choosing self-respect over reaction, cultivating calm over drama, and finding people who mirror back authenticity rather than performance. When recovery looks like thriving, it undermines the false narrative the narcissistic woman tried to maintain. That truth stings because it proves that authentic living was possible all along. Moving forward with strength. You are more than the reflection someone used to survive. The silence, the betrayal, the coldness, none of those things define your worth. Strength shows in the way life is rebuilt, the steady commitments to truth, the careful setting of boundaries, the cultivation of relationships where mutual respect and honesty are the standard. Healing is not an endurance test. It is a deliberate practice of reclaiming time, attention, and dignity. Carry this forward as an affirmation. Resilience is real, and recovery is the most honest answer to being devalued. The person who caused pain may never admit what was lost. That does not change what was gained. Your clarity, your growth, your re-centered life. When the urge rises to prove something to anyone who once hurt you, redirect that energy into building a life that requires no permission to be whole. If this video resonated, consider leaving a comment and sharing how this experience shaped the strength being built today. Sharing helps others see that they are not alone. And as always, because YouTube's algorithm tends to favor videos with strong engagement, if you feel this video has brought you value, a simple like and a quick subscribe would mean so much. It not only helps this message reach more people who need it, but also ensures you will never miss the next video that could make a difference in your journey. Thanks all